Hi, my name is Vanessa Johnson. This is our first Malu Journey podcast. We decided to create a podcast to share all the exciting things that we have in the works for Malu Journey. I am the Chief Operating Officer here at Malu Journey, and I will be interviewing Melissa Goldner, who is the founder of Malu Journey. And so we'll learn all the amazing things that Melissa has been up to. But before we even jump into that, I think we just need to understand a little bit more about who you are, what made you create Malu Journey, and then we'll take it from there.
So, Melissa Goldner, I am a recovering management consulting partner. I have over 20 years of large scale transformation experience, specifically in org psychology, org transformations, and culture and employee engagement. The reason why we're here today is because even when I was practicing as an org and culture practitioner, I always felt like I was going rogue. At times, I didn't feel like we were actually serving the right hero. And I'm taking everything that I've learned from org psychology and transformations and making the human the hero. The reason why Malu Journey came to existence was actually part of a personal story of mine. I am a daughter of two Chinese immigrants and who came from a place of scarcity. And when they came to the United States, as many Chinese parents would do, they told me that I had three choices of what to be when I grew up: a doctor, a lawyer, or a partner of a consulting company similar to my father. And so I never actually questioned, because of my family of origin, whether or not I should do something else. I actually found worth through my velocity of award collecting and became a partner at an early age in hopes of honoring my immigrant family. Fast forward, I was a partner at a management consulting company. I was one of the top performers. Went on maternity leave for my second, experienced postpartum depression, and came back to an organization that wasn't doing as well. Got laid off, and it shook my entire identity. I did not know who I was, what I stood for, whether or not I was worthy, whether or not I was relevant. And so I found a therapist that helped me get out of that postpartum depression. And I remember the mantra for the year. You're going to love this, Vanessa. It was find words in being, not doing. And I am proud to say I finally found that. But Malu Journey came from a place where the therapy was very helpful. My executive coaching, my coach was very helpful. The coach understood the invisible norms of working in an organization, the politics,
Yep.
the toxicity. But my therapist grew up in academia, so she was only able to help me with a lot of things that went on in my childhood and uncovering why I'm thinking a certain way. And I started to feel like I was compartmentalizing my personal needs with my therapist and then my professional needs and goals with my coach. And so I started to look, where is there a place, that combines therapy, coaching, as well as community? Because I do not believe that we should be going through our healing journeys by ourselves. Nothing existed, so I created Malu Journey.
That's beautiful. And I think especially when you're dealing with leadership or you're dealing with executive people that are in executive roles, it's like, how do you separate the two? You spend 50, 60 hours a week working. And so that's the majority of the times that's more time that you spend with your family. And so to separate your personal and professional life, it almost seems impossible. So before we go into that, because I have a
Yes.
ton of stories that I can share about that, can you tell us a little bit more about what does Malu journey mean? Like, where did Malu come from?
Sure. So Malu is actually a Chinese word for horse road. My mother told me a story. When I was 3 years old, I was apparently walking down a street and I was huffing and puffing. And she said, Ching Ching, which was my Chinese nickname. Why are you getting so angry? And I said, why are we calling this horse road in Chinese when there's no horses on the road? And she said to me, oh no, Melissa, you're going to question status quo for the rest of your life, aren't you? And she was correct. I, created my own majors in college. I'm still the only person that graduated with my dual degree. I created my own partner of transformation position at Ogilvy and Mather because I told the CEO that I would save him hundreds and thousands of dollars in consulting dollars because I was redoing all their work in-house. I changed from org effectiveness into account management because I decided I wanted to learn more about the numbers and the business. And when it came to therapy and coaching, I questioned why are we even separating them in the first place? Gone are the days that you could separate your personal and professional life. So why are we doing it in terms of our support services?
And I guess one question I have to ask is why now? Like, why create Malu Journey at this point in time with everything that's going on in the world? Why is it so important to have Malu Journey as, a modality to receive care at this point in this juncture of our lives?
I think it's really important because you're addressing your past to your present to your future. And I don't think that many people do so. I think people are like, I either need a coach or I either need a therapist, right? And then they get jet lag. They get the, what is that called with the neck thing? Neck brace?
Oh, the net breaks. Yeah.
They basically whiplash. You get
Oh,
whiplash because you don't know which one to choose. And I really think that you need both. It's really important. Therapy helps you uncover the family dynamics or cultural nuances or why you believe a certain thing is a truth when it's not a truth. And to quote our resident coach, Kara Glassman, she helps you differentiate between a little T truth, which is a limited belief, or a big T truth, which is a reality of what's happening. Many people in corporate or many people that are high achieving don't get the chance to pause and actually question themselves of why is this even true? And unpacking that information. And so I think first, it's really important to pause and have that safe space to be able to gain clarity in terms of why you're thinking the way you are and giving yourself even grace for the way why we make certain decisions. And the coaching is the proactive part. It's the part where you can actually set a goal and meet it. And so you need a blend of both to be able to do so.
and I think one thing that we often talk about is that, you can't separate your personal from your professional lives anymore. Like I give the example of, when the hurricane hit in Jamaica, and I had to go to work. And, I have family in Jamaica. I know I have friends that have families in Jamaica. I have people who lost their homes and who are rebuilding. And I remember going to work and just thinking about it because at this point, my family is without food, they're without water, they're without electricity. And so I'm sitting in front of the computer and thinking, how can I focus on this right now? How can I focus on work when, I have family that I can't even hear from and I'm just, hoping and praying that everything is okay, but to sit in front of the desk and to smile and to keep going, like that's impossible.
Right.
And so that's just one thing that we're looking at. That's just Jamaica, right? Like all the things that's going on in the world right now. You had mentioned before, with all the massive layoffs that are
Yes.
happening and just everything that's going on with the wars. And, we had the earthquake that happened in Venezuela. And so it's almost impossible to separate what's going on in the outside world with what's going on in our workplaces.
You land on a really good point because the world is going through so much change right now, macro, in your family, at work, right? Like 7 transformations at one time. No longer are the days there's one like Microsoft upgrade, and I just don't think that we're providing the right support systems or tools to people in general, right? To use a business example with the layoffs, many people are going through grief. They're going through survivor guilt. They're going through maybe an identity crisis because they used to oversee 70 people and all of a sudden they're an independent contributor. And that's also identity work, right?
Yeah.
And so one reason why we also have Malu for Business is because we want to be able to address the root cause of the human within the organization. It's not going to be solved with a pizza party or an AI training.
So let's talk a little bit more about that because it sounds like Malu Journey kind of has two different audiences. You
Yes.
have the individuals and you have the Malu for business. So can you talk a little bit about those two different audiences and I guess who are the ideal members or the people that should be, contributing in from the business perspective versus the individual?
Great question. So it all started originally with a pilot for a cohort-based program. The program, first of all, I want to give credit to all the 60 plus preferred partners in our ecosystem. These are licensed psychologists, therapists, and certified business coaches that specialize across all the modalities, right? And So it originally started with us trying to meet everybody in the season that they were in. So to give you a couple of examples, some people were going through a loss of another loved one, like a human being. Some people were grieving an identity that they're no longer. They were either in transition between jobs, or they were a new mother that was grieving prior relationships. There were a plethora of different things that these individuals were going through. And so based on the preferred partner network, we would pull out specifically grief counselors, people that specialize in identity work, people that specialize in cognitive behavior, and reframing for the group. And another thing is they went into this process with a group of 8 to 10 other individuals. And what was really beautiful was that in most of my conversations with them before they joined the cohort, they felt like they were the only ones going through it. Within the first workshop, there were tears. There was, and it was tears of actually gratitude because they finally found a space where they felt seen, and they finally found a space where they realized they were not in it by themselves. And so these workshops were, they're customized based on those specific needs. So you get introduced to a somatic therapist, a cognitive behavioral therapist leads a workshop. You practice some of those tools in community. You will get inspired and learn from each other, and actually kind of rooting for each other's growth as well, which is something so beautiful to see. And then we bring in the coaches to reevaluate your values after you do that internal work. And our hypothesis was that your goals may change after you do that internal work. And some of the people that originally came for being the next C-suite level executive, their goal at the end of the cohort was, how the hell do I get out of my job and live a life of joy, where my professional and my personal lives are aligned?
So that sounds like that's more of the individual.
Yes.
So can you further elaborate as to what the organization side looks like? So I imagine you're partnering with other businesses who may be looking to improve their leadership skills, or
Yes.
people who are organizations who are looking to help managers as far as people management. Let's talk a little bit more about that. Like, what does the Malu journey for business look like?
So I can actually give real examples of organizations that have reached out that want to partner with Malu. So I'll start there, but I also want to say the differentiator with Malu is that most organizations train you on like a capability, but not a lot of people go in and teach you like emotional tools and regulation tools to help you perform better in the workplace and at home. Okay. So that's a big differentiator because we actually create curriculum that's based on the whole person, not just the worker. All right. But here's some examples. So a very large financial services institution reached out because they are changing their role of their financial advisors so dramatically with now 5 generations in the workforce. And they're finding droves of people leaving the organization for other organizations. And so an org psychologist might teach a subset of those financial advisors family dynamics, because that's now expected from the client base. Okay. And so that could be a workshop, that could be a cohort, right? Another organization reached out because they were interested in a leadership workshop or leadership offsite specifically focused on how to regulate a leader. They're realizing that now their leaders that are going through and driving all these transformations, how they're feeling is trickling into their teams, their employees, everything like that. And so I would argue that a good leader is a regulated leader and knows how to build regulated teams. And you don't learn that in managerial training, right? You learn how to work the CRM, you go into your sales training, but I don't think that there are many organizations that teach you how to create a safe space that drives innovation, performance, and empathy.
It's interesting you say that, because I often have this conversation with folks about how people, they get promoted to a next role. So, for example, they're an assistant who goes to a manager and they're now managing a team.
Hmm.
But even when you do that, most often they get trainings in like how to use the tools and how to use the different systems so that they can go into that managerial role. but never do I really hear that they get the actual managing or managerial training to manage the people.
Hmm.
And so I guess one thing that I'm essentially trying to touch on is how do you make sure that you create a training that's actually effective or that's sustainable? Because I think what I often, being a COO, I've been a COO in many different organizations. And one of the things that I find a lot of organizations struggle with is that, they're trying to check off the
Yeah.
box for the organization. So they'll do employee surveys or they'll do these leadership workshops. And one thing that I often argue for is like, that's great. But then what do you do with that? Or how do you make sure that this becomes a part of like your everyday work?
Part of
So
the
it's
system.
exactly. And so what would you recommend for organizations who are looking to implement, new tools, new systems, creating systems that are sustainable and not just a check off the box to make sure that, we're actually training our employees and that's it.
So you bring up a great point about employee engagement. So studies are showing that employee engagement surveys are not really working. In that, first of all, the trust has been broken with a lot of employees with their leaders or their institutions itself. So they're not even writing real data into those surveys in the first place. So I'd love to shift the conversation from employee engagement to employee sustainment. This came from, and I want to shout out again to the Stanford faculty that worked with Malu Journey on doing a lot of this research, but we came up with a Fit to Thrive index that really helps managers or leaders pinpoint what they need to focus on and can identify signals before the attrition, before the lack of innovation, before the drop in performance. And it's really 4 different buckets. One is work capacity fit. So with all the layoffs that are happening right now, is it really feasible for one person to do 150% of a job? The math doesn't math. Okay. And so we need to think creatively of how to create those job roles. Maybe it's where your energy is, where someone might thrive. And maybe it's a place where people would find alignment with their values. The second bucket is the values. And so is your activity, do you see your personal values reflected in the work activity day to day? If not, you're going to start feeling like somatic. Your body's going to start feeling like there's something wrong in this ecosystem, right? The third one, which we've heard a lot, is accountable safety, psychological safety, with accountability. And the last one is velocity to repair. So after organizational rift or a team issue or a one-on-one conflict, how fast can you get back? And that is specifically created by org psychologists and therapists. And I think that helps you identify where you need to focus on, and you can take the assessment again and again, and make it part of your system, part of the ritual, part of what just a good leader does.
I think the most important part to what you said is that the organization has to make the space for that. And so also that means creating the time, baking it into something that they're doing on an ongoing basis.
Hmm.
And I think that is something that most organizations struggle with. I think they will look at it in the beginning of the year when they're looking to set their goals. And then when it comes to actually um, making sure that it's coming to fruition throughout the year, that's usually when the ball drops. And so I think that's the part where, a lot of organizations need help is just creating the space. I think resourcing is a huge issue. Everyone is all AI these days, which, as you know, I'm a big fan
Yes.
of AI. But the reality is that AI can only do but so much. And so I think what was crucial about everything you said is keeping the people in the forefront of all of the work that we're doing and how do we prioritize them. So I guess, is there anything else from the, I guess, Malu journey for business side that you'd like to share with the audience?
I think right now we're going through a time where we're more connected than ever digitally, but we are more lonely than ever before, more depressed, more anxious, and that is going to show up in the performance of your employees unless you actually address the root causes. And so for those leaders that care about performance, you want to hear about this. For those leaders that are in charge of employees, you want to hear about this. For those leaders that care about innovation, you're going to want to hear about this. For the CFO, you're going to want to know this and bring in Malu Journey before it's too late, because your people ultimately are going to get you from A to B and, manage AI, but it's human led.
And the other piece that I'd love for you to touch on, because I think this was also be a good segue into focusing more on the individual and what that looks like. But can you talk a little bit more about, the importance or the differentiator with Malu Journey as far as bringing in org psychologist, a therapist, and a coach? I think one of the things that I found unique about Malu Journey is that you have all three. And often when I have engaged in like HR conversations, it's usually a coach, a coach who's helping leaders, helping them manage their teams or coaching them how to manage teams, but never an org psychologist, a coach, and a therapist. So, can you talk a little bit more about that and what that looks like and kind of why you feel it's important to kind of have those three levers in tandem?
Well, first, there's a lot of coaches out there. That one might argue that it could be like a saturated market. And in my humble opinion, I do think that sometimes coaches can actually be dangerous to an individual because they don't have the right education like a therapist does in dealing with, you know, acute grief or trauma experiences and things like that. And we are a combination of all of our experiences, right? And so the reason why I wanted to bring those all in is because I want those people that are trained to be able to navigate those types of traumatic events and also link it to the performance of an organization.
Great. So switching gears a little bit. So I think the Malu Journey individual experience is near and dear to my heart. Especially I think within my own personal life, I struggled with separating my personal and professional life. And I struggled with, in particular, recognizing that the same behaviors that I was exuding in my personal life was also being exhibited in my professional life. And so can you talk a little bit more about Malu Journey for the individual and like how do you help people who are navigating, separating those two or who are trying to find ways to bring them all together? Because I think even for me, it took a therapist, it took a mentor, it took Malu Journey to recognize that these behaviors were being exhibited in all areas of my life. They weren't separated and they were the same. So how does Malu Journey, what does that experience look like essentially?
So, for instance, a lot of my friends that are female executives right now, they hire these burnout coaches, but then they're still very burnt out because they're literally writing like to-do lists on all the things that they're supposed to do that their coach told them to, and they're not actually going into, wait, you know. Where did I get this sense of work ethic? For me, it was because I was trying to desperately honor my immigrant family, right?
Right.
And so then unfortunately, what happened with that is that I took an external way of worth to measure my internal worth. And so when I was laid off, I did not know who the hell I was, right? And so Malu Journey does that. So in one of our cohorts, we did a kind of mapping exercise where people started to rate themselves on how they felt worthy.
Mm.
And most of the cohort in the beginning, it was all external factors. And then there was a list of internal factors, and they were like, oh my goodness, I have completely not even worried about myself. This might be a reason why I'm feeling this way.
Right.
Right. And so then the coaches help you come up with a plan to move you from external to that internal form of worth. Actually, there was an activity where they were able to create an internal scorecard for themselves
Nice.
and then measure themselves against that and then to keep each other accountable. So the transformations I saw were wonderful. And like you said, and I would love to hear more about your story about, your relationship versus your work and how it's showing up. But a lot of people had aha moments that, oh my gosh, the problems that I have in my work are the same as the problems that I have at home.
Yeah.
And then by going through a Malu journey, they were actually able to heal in two different arenas because it's all
It's
one.
all interconnected.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
we are one person. Well, I guess to share my lovely story, I was, as you know, working at the same organization for 15 years. For me, that was normal. My mom is from Jamaica, born in Jamaica. My dad was actually born here, but his family's from Jamaica as well. And both of my parents have worked at their organizations for 30 plus years. And so for me, it was like find that one place, that you were there, that you can grow with, that you can learn from, and just you stay there because there's like the safety net security. But things changed, things evolved. And so in my workplace, things started to become toxic. I recognized that, things were changing, leadership have changed. And so I realized that I kept holding on to that job because it felt like a safety net of security for me. And so one thing I recognized is that I was holding on to potential for this
Mhm.
job. There would be some days that would be really, really great. There would be some days that were really, really bad. And when those days were really, really bad, I'm like, oh, it's going to go back to the really great days. It's not going to change. It's going to get better. I see things improving, and I would hold on to that. And I remember when I met my mentor and coach, who is now one of our preferred partners. And I was talking to her about work and just how the toxic it was for me. And then I don't know what sparked me to talk about my relationship, because at this time I was also in a very long relationship. And we were arguing all the time. But I was like, we had really great moments. He's been here for me for this and through this part of my life, and just helping me navigate so many experiences. And she's like, Vanessa, do you realize that you're doing the same thing that you're doing in your relationship with your job? You're holding on to potential, even though it doesn't align with your values and everything you're for. And I was like, huh, that's funny. So eventually I transitioned from that, but it was just like, wow, I didn't realize how connected they were and how I was exhibiting those behaviors. And so, I started to take the time and the space to just really sit back and come back to myself and say, what are my values? What truly aligns with me as an individual? And I realized that same list that I had from, whether it's dating or looking at a partner, was the same exact list that worked for the workplace as well. Like, I'm someone who loves transparency, trust, communication, someone who's innovative or who allows me to be
Mhm.
innovative or creative. Me and AI, I like to
Yes.
build things all the time. So I can obviously ramble on and on about this, but I think it's very crucial for us to recognize that we are one person. And so those behaviors that we exhibit on our day-to-day lives, they will also show up in the workplace as well, even if we don't recognize it.
Mm.
So given that though, and obviously I had the lovely privilege of being able to sit on some of the cohorts. What are the different ways in which someone can, become a part of Malu Journey? Like, what does that look like for someone who is navigating this space in their lives?
So first and foremost, it started off with a cohort experience where you're put in a group of 8 to 10 other individuals. And based on the things that you're trying to accomplish and based on your goals, I will pull out the specific therapist or coach that is specialized in that arena. And you go through it in a community over a couple of weeks of time. There's also, for those that aren't able to commit the time or the resources or the financial commitment, and they want to try a Malu experience and dip their toes in to say, what would it feel like to be in a room and have a discussion that's led by a therapist and a coach? We have a dinner, a connect experience on July 29th in New York City, where it's really going to be a set amount of people, intimate, where people can just put their masks down and have really authentic communication and um, relationship building in a safe place. And I find that to be quite powerful. And for those that want to go a little bit further, there is the 3-hour immerse experience where it's led by a therapist and coach in the fall. And the topic is how unpacking how high achievers relationships with work and worth.
So one thing that I wanted to kind of touch on is, while Malu Journey is very beneficial from the perspective of having both an org psychologist, a therapist, and a coach, I think one thing that was beautiful about Malu Journey is the whole concept or notion of community. When I joined Malu Journey, I was able to sit in on the cohorts, and I was able to hear these phenomenal stories of women who are navigating different areas of their lives. I think for me in particular, it really touched me because I was navigating a life where I have everything that's going on at work, but then I also had my relationship issues that I alluded to before. I also have a brother who suffers with schizoaffective disorder, and having to navigate that being an older sister. I won't even go into
Mhm.
the trauma that is associated with being an
Yeah.
older sister. But I think the piece for me was being able to hear other people who were kind of struggling with navigating this time of their lives as well and recognizing that I wasn't alone.
Hmm.
So can you talk a little bit more about that community building and how you do that? Because I think what was really powerful is, seeing people just be able to be vulnerable amongst people that they don't even know.
We created community as one of the major pillars intentionally for the design of the program experience for a reason. Because number one, we realized that people are lonelier than ever, more depressed than ever. We're digitally connected, but disconnected sometimes with ourselves. Mm. In organizations, a lot of people couldn't find their place of safety, so they couldn't bring up the personal things without feeling like they're getting judged or could lose their job or things like that, and vice versa. And I think it was really powerful when you create a room where people can just put their whole selves, personal, like you said, professional, all in one, and really feel seen and really feel held. And so the objective of creating community is to create these enduring relationships so that you have these individuals that'll be there for your life during your highs and your lows. Celebrate your wins for the rest of your life, regardless of if the program ended.
Yeah, and I think that's what's really beautiful because even after all of these cohorts that we've done thus far, like they've always recommended 100% of people have recommended Malu Journey. And so with that being said, if someone is interested in learning about Malu Journey, what are the steps that they would have to take to become a part of the program?
Visit our website, www.malujourney.com, or email us at info@malujourney.com, and we'll get back to you and set up a conversation.
Great. Well, this was a great conversation, and I'm so excited that we started this
Thank
series.
you.
Are there any closing remarks or words that you'd like to say before we go?
Stay tuned for more. Our new next podcasts are going to be interviews with our therapists, interviews with our coaches, interviews with both of them together on really important topics. And so I think we all, including myself, are so excited to learn all the wonderful things from our partner ecosystem.